Hello everyone. So, how are you? I guess you all are fine. So, we're gonna start a series of center template libraries in C++, and vector is the first thing in C++ STL we're gonna learn today. So, what is vector? Vector is widely used in competitive programming in C++. So vector is nothing just a alternative of arrays. So why do we need it? Because we already have array. So here is the difference between vectors and arrays. So arrays are static type while vectors are dynamic type. Means that arrays can't shrink or increase their size at the runtime while vectors can do the same. Let's take an example. Like we have declared the size of array b as equals to 5. So we cannot insert 6 elements in the array at the runtime. Or if we have declared the size of array as 0, then also we cannot insert the element in the array. But in vectors, if we have declared the size of the vector is equals to 3, so we can also include n number of elements in the vector. So this is the basic difference between arrays and the vectors. Then arrays are built in language construct in C++. That means that it is a inbuilt feature of the language which they provide with the normal compiler. But what is vector? Vector is a template class. Means that it's a class of template. Templates are generic classes. Okay, so the next difference is arrays have fixed size while the vectors are resizable, which we already have learned that the vector size can be increased or decreased at the runtime. Or let's consider as a chance that we have initialized the arrays as by the vectors, sorry, by the pointers. So at the time of pointer we use malloc type functions to allocate dynamic arrays. So if we have allocated certain memory block to an array in normal array, so if we have to free the space, we have to explicitly deallocate the space. But in vector, like take an example that where vector c is initially 0. Okay, so the size of the c vector here. So if we insert 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the array, in the vector, the size would be 5. But if we pop an element or remove an element from the array, the size automatically changes to 4. So this is how vector works. So now we start how to use vectors in our coding. So for that we're gonna cover this headings like initialization of vector, insertion in the vector, traversing on the vector, and deletion in the vector. So let's start. First of all, include the IOStream library, which is the basic input output stream. Then to use the vector we have to include vector library. Okay, then we are including namespace for standard. Here is a main function, And so to initialize the vector, first of all we have to declare it. So to declare the vector, first we will write the keyword vector, then this brackets, and here we'll write the type of vector, means the data is stored by the vector. It may be integer, it may be character, it may be a float value. Okay, so here we are using integer, so we'll write here integer. Okay, now a vector is been defined, but we haven't named it yet, so name it vector. Okay, so this is the basic definition of a vector. Now if we have to initialize the vector by a certain number of elements, so we used brackets near the name, and here we use t, or the elements that of which let's consider value. Okay, so the value will be here. So what will this do? It will make the vector like this. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So it will insert the 5 elements, and all the 5 elements are 1 because the value we have given here is 1. Okay, so this is the initialization of vector. Now if we have to insert the elements in the vector, how we have to do that? So remind that in the vector it's a good practice to insert the element by using push back function. So basically what will this function do? It will take an element and push it to the end of the vector. So if we insert here 6, so our vector will look like this, because here 1 we have already inserted at the time of initialization. Okay, so our vector will look like this. Or if we have to overwrite a particular element, so we can do it by the practice we have already learned in the array. Okay, so what will this do? It will basically access the 0th index element in the vector, and we will assign the value to it. So what will it do? It will first go to the index 0 and initialize that value with the 8. Okay, so our vector will next look like this. Okay, so this is the basics of insertion in the vector. Okay, so to traverse the vector, we gonna use the for loop and initialize the I to I, and it will increase its value till the size of the vector, or here it is, and basically see out the vector index I. Okay, so what will it gonna do? Let's test it. Okay, so the code is perfectly compiled, now running it. So let's guess what that bulb will be the output. Okay, so okay, we are getting the same output as expected. Here you can see that. Okay, so here we can, this is how we can traverse the vector. Okay, now come to the deletion of the element in the vector. Okay, So to delete a particular element in the vector, we will use a term that called as erase. Okay, so to use the erase function, firstly we have to learn about fact.begin function. Okay, so what uh, begin function do is it will return the reference to the first element in vector. Okay, so what basically do begins is it return a reference pointer of the first element in the vector. So like we have to erase the, okay, we have to delete the second index element from the vector. So what we gonna write here is vector dot begin, which will return the reference to the first element. If we just write here like this, it will remove the 8 from the vector. But if we have to remove, like consider it 6. Okay, so what was the position of 6? It at the index of 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, so we have to write here plus 5. So what will it do? It will erase the 6th element from the vector. So let's again traverse the vector, that how will it look like. Okay, so right here handle so that we can easily figure it out. Okay, so now we are running the code. It is perfectly compiled now. Okay, so here we can see that the first vector is this 81116, and then the vector become 81111. Okay, so the 6 is removed from the vector. So this is how the erase function works. Okay.